Every generation thinks the next one is getting worse. But psychology says they're just becoming different. Because the era you're born into doesn't just decide your age, it quietly programs how your brain sees the world. Let's break down what really goes on in the minds of each generation, and you'll understand why people think so differently today. 1. Baby boomers, the builders. They grew up when the world was rebuilding after war. Everything around them screamed stability, progress, family, hard work. Psychologically, their brains were trained to believe, if I work hard, I'll earn safety. That's why many boomers value loyalty, routine, and respect for rules. It's not because they're old-fashioned. It's because they were raised in a world where systems worked. But here's the catch. When the world started moving faster, new tech, new values, their whole sense of purpose got shaken. They spent decades building an identity around work, so retirement or sudden change can feel like losing themselves. Underneath their calm, they often struggle with questions like, who am I now that I'm not needed the same way? Second Generation X, the survivors. They were the middle children of history, not old enough to enjoy the stable past, not young enough to fit in the digital age easily. They saw their parents lose jobs, saw divorces rise, and learned this one message early. No one's coming to save you. That's why Gen X became the most self-reliant generation. They don't like showing weakness. They value independence, not because it's trendy, but because they had no other choice growing up. Psychologically, they developed high adaptability and emotional armor. They don't easily trust institutions or trends because they've watched too many fail. If boomers built systems, Gen X learned how to survive when those systems broke. 3. Millennials, the dreamers. This generation was told to dream big, and then grew up watching the world fall apart financially, socially, and emotionally. They entered adulthood during the 2008 financial crash, saw job markets collapse, and were told, just work harder. Psychology calls this expectation trauma, when your brain grows up believing the world is fair, and then reality slaps you with chaos. That's why so many millennials struggle with burnout, imposter syndrome, and a constant feeling that they're behind. But here's the twist. They're also the first generation to chase meaning over money. They don't want to just survive. They want to feel alive. They value purpose, freedom, and self-expression. But that same freedom also keeps them restless, always searching for something that feels enough. They're the bridge between the old world and the digital one, and that bridge isn't stable. Fourth Generation Z, the hyper-aware. This is the first generation born into constant connection. They didn't discover the internet. They grew up inside it. And that changes everything psychologically. Their brains are wired for speed, notifications, trends, opinions, information overload. They can process a lot, but it comes with a cost. Constant mental noise. They're more aware, more skeptical, and more anxious than any before them. Because when you grow up seeing everything, you also start to feel everything. Climate change, war, inequality, expectations, perfection. Their biggest challenge isn't lack of opportunity, it's overstimulation. They know too much, too soon. That's why they crave peace, authenticity, and control. They're not sensitive, they're overloaded. Psychologists call this digital burnout, a brain that's still young, but constantly processing the weight of the entire world. 5. Generation Alpha, the unknown. They're growing up with AI, short attention spans, and parents who already lived their childhood online. Their world is all about customization. They'll have less patience but more information, less physical freedom but more virtual control. Their challenge will be learning how to feel real in a world that's mostly digital. And if they don't, we'll have an entire generation that's connected to everything but themselves. Here's the truth. Every generation is just a reflection of its environment. You're not born different. You're wired different by what you survive. Boomers built. Gen X adapted. Millennials searched for meaning. Gen Z questioned everything. And Alpha? They'll redefine what human even means. So next time you see a generational fight online, remember, it's not about who's better or worse. It's about who was shaped by what world. Because psychology says, The time you grow up in doesn't just change your behavior, it changes your brain.